Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Becoming Anchored podcast. We are so glad to have you today. I'm joined by the lovely Heidi Hensley, and so I think this is actually her 4th episode. And she's just a champ for coming on a Friday, and I just adore her and all of her wisdom, and so I'm super glad to have her on today's show. If you're new to the Becoming Anchored podcast, we really are about just this idea that hope is so fundamental to the human experience. And Heidi and I work with clients on a daily basis, and a lot of our work is highlighting resiliency and noticing the hopefulness and providing a safe space to explore all of that. And we also are really rooted in this belief that we can access peace with our bodies. And so as we kind of shift directions with this podcast, we're going to be talking more and more about body image, embodiment, all the things that will hopefully support you in moving towards peace with your body. If you are local to Tennessee, we would love to work with you. And if not, we encourage you to find a mental health provider in your area. So welcome, Heidi.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, yeah. So Heidi and I were kind of chatting about what we wanted to share for this episode, and we thought about the topic moving from body image to embodiment. So Heidi, take it away.
This is one of my favorite topics lately. It gets me like real jazzed. I feel like it's such an exciting, empowering idea when we think about body image to embodiment, because body image has been something that I feel like it is being more talked about in a critical way, as far as like, what is it? How do we identify how we feel about our bodies and what we're saying about our bodies? And I love that. But today I think we're going to talk more about how do we move from body image to embodiment, and how are they different? How does embodiment support you working towards the body image you want?
Yeah.
Because body image is more than just what we say or think about our bodies. I think it is also being present in your body. And so that's where embodiment comes from. Embodiment is the experience of being in your body. So I'd like to talk today about how they're related and how they support each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this. And yeah, I think you're right. Like, especially in our field, there has been some criticism from professionals that body image and that term at large doesn't necessarily encompass the entire client experience or the human experience, right? And so we're here just to kind of share our thoughts on that and provide maybe additional layers to that. What I find a lot of times if I'm working with like a newer client is that they will report high body image distress. And we were just chatting about this before we started recording, but this idea of like moving from our thoughts to how we feel in our bodies.
Yes, yeah.
And we want to, of course, help our clients have specific tools and strategies to perhaps place less value in their thoughts, to engage in what we call like cognitive diffusion or reappraisal. Those are wonderful strategies if you do notice intense, distressing thoughts. And what can happen is if we're too focused on the content of the thought, we can stay up in our heads, and our head and body can just become so disconnected, right? So I think of embodiment also as like reconnecting, realigning, having congruence between like my head, heart, soul, mind, body, all of those things.
Yeah, and I think, I use the term intellectualizing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times where people will come in with an emotion and they intellectualize it. And what I mean when I say that is they want to tell you about what it is, tell you about why they have it, and it's like reading a textbook. It's like, oh, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. Of course you felt sad when your dog died. But their affect is not that they're experiencing sadness. And so that's when I start to think about like, well, where do you feel this emotion in your body? And if there's a disconnect, oftentimes there is no emotional experience.
Yeah.
And so that's part of where I think, I talk about intellectualizing emotions, but also like the human experience can be intellectualized and not felt or like experienced in the body. And so we start to think about how do we bridge that gap and have both of those things happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and what Heidi means by affect is really just this like kind of presentation, if you will. I think it can include a lot of different things. A lot of times as therapists, we're kind of looking at like a client's facial expressions. We might be looking at their body language. I think all of those things can kind of tell us, okay, are they connecting what they're telling us to their emotional experiences? Right? Because if someone's like, my dog just died today, and there's no distress, or they're not able to pinpoint a physical sensation in their body, that might tell us as therapists that there is some incongruence, or kind of maybe a block, if you will. That's another way to think about it, between what their emotional experience is and their ability to feel.
Yeah, I've even heard people say like, I really want to cry, but I never do.
Yeah, or I can't.
I can't.
Yeah.
And I want to. I feel very sad. I don't understand why this is happening. If you explore more with them and find that like maybe there is some emotional avoidance going on regularly, reconnecting them to their body can help them have more of a like whole experience of emotions instead of just being able to tell you that I feel sad.
Right. Yeah, so I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts as far as things that disconnect us from our bodies? Because if we're going for reconnection, I think the first step is we really have to, like, look at what in our worlds are disconnecting us from being embodied.
A really big event of trauma or repeated smaller events of trauma can be disconnecting, especially if they are like body-based traumas. Often if really scary things happen to our bodies, the way that our brain will cope with that is by disconnecting from our body, as to have less of an emotional experience that is overwhelming or distressing for the brain.
Sure.
So if there's like a body-based trauma, or really any trauma can cause disconnection. A lot of times the people that we are going to see, because they're seeking out our practice for disordered eating or things of that nature, repeated denial of our body, abandonment of our body. And what I mean by that is like not feeding it when it's hungry, and just stepping away from the cues that our body is giving us and denying those will often create this idea of disconnection, where you have a hard time reconnecting with the body because you've spent so long disconnecting from it. Those are the two things that come up first. I'm sure there's others that you might have to add to that, but those are the two that I see the most often that lead to like a staunch inability to reconnect.
Yeah. And these trauma responses that Heidi's talking about and referencing today, they are survival strategies, you know, and we actually just had a trauma training for the team right this past week, and we talked about that. There's all sorts of survival strategies. We've got a great episode, I think in maybe season 3, about just like trauma 101, and I talked to Alice Strickland about it, and she's a trauma expert, but she talks about, you know, going into fight or flight or freeze or fawn, and some therapists are using additional language nowadays called flop, and they do protect us and they do serve us. The problem is if we maybe have symptomology of PTSD or that full diagnosis, we can tend to stay in those places. And so what effective trauma treatment and body-based treatment does is it teaches us to move through those trauma responses and move out of them, versus staying in that frozen place of whatever I did during the trauma that protected me.
Yes.
We don't want to stay there long term, right? But yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of ways that we disconnect from our body. I mean, I love that you mentioned the self-abandonment as well, and that can take so many different shapes or forms. I mean, you know, I've worked with clients who have referenced like the idea that like their parents never talked to them about their boundaries, and that down the road has led to like self-abandonment, right? Because they weren't taught to like stand up for themselves or speak up for what they need. And so they maybe like have worked through lunch without like taking a lunch break, even though they really wanted to like eat lunch. Or I've also worked with clients that have like held their bladder for extended periods of time because they were afraid to like hold their hand up and be like, hey, I need to use the restroom, right? So there's all sorts of ways that involve our bodies that can like manifest this like self-abandonment that you're talking about. Yeah.
Without it having to be like motivated by self-abandonment, but it still is self-abandonment.
Right. Like most of the time, especially if we're newer to therapy, we're not like, I'm self-abandoning right now, right? It's like a self-conscious process that a subconscious process that is happening for clients. And so our job as therapists is to start bringing awareness to these processes so that they can get their needs met in a more effective way. Yeah. Anything else that you can think of that disconnects people from body?
Nothing specific, but I do find that it's usually a pattern of behaviors over time. It's not something that they are new to. It is something that they have done for a while. And so having them recognize it as something that we would say, hey, if we re-engage with our bodies and what it needs, this will be helpful. It might be a surprise to them, like, oh, okay, I didn't even think about that, or I didn't know that would be so detrimental over time. But it's not usually like, well, I've been self-abandoning for 5 days, and so now I'm disconnected from my body. It's like, this is a pattern of behavior that has a long history.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of folks, what I see is like they can almost feel or tell me that it feels like selfish to start to pay attention to their needs and honor their needs and like speak up for their bodily needs. And, you know, we're here to tell you that it's absolutely not. And at the same time, I can also understand for someone that has been self-abandoning for months, days, years, right? Like that, of course, might feel selfish to them. And doing something new and changing behaviors, I mean, is hard. And so we're the first to like acknowledge that and validate that today. Yeah. And I'm curious, Heidi, like how embodiment and this idea of like reconnecting to your body and your bodily experiences, how that serves clients that are coming in and telling you, hey, I'm having a lot of body image distress. What are your thoughts there?
When we start, we'll get into interventions later in the episode, but when we start to do the interventions that we're going to talk about, oftentimes we find how uncomfortable these people often feel with even being nice to their body, or like being aware of their body. And so one thing that I strongly believe is that the more we are unaware of our body, the more we avoid our body by like touching it or looking at it or lotioning it or whatever, the more that we do that, the worse our body image is. That is something I believe. So there is, in my opinion, a strong positive correlation between accepting your body and being comfortable with your body.
Sure.
And so the way that we become uncomfortable with our body is by not being present in it, not being aware of what it's telling us, what we're feeling. And that doesn't just mean emotions. It can be hunger. It could be headache. It could be pain. It could be peace. It could be joy. It could be any emotion that's in our body. The more that we become unaware of that, the more uncomfortable we are with our body. And so this idea of body image and comfort and comfortability with your body, I think, are highly correlated.
Yeah. And so it's like the question of like, okay, how do we increase someone's ability to like be in their bodies, right? That's long-term what we're going for. I think too, circling back to the trauma piece, right? It's like a lot of times there is kind of a fear of starting to reconnect body and mind, right? Because there is a fear that like, I won't be safe, right? Whether this is real or imagined. And so what we're working on in the therapy space is cultivating safety, and we really want to encourage our clients at least to like pace it, right? Because talking about embodiment and starting to use more mindfulness practices, maybe introducing somatic vocabulary to clients, that's all good and dandy, but we also want them to have that foundation of safety first and foremost, right? And what we're working on here is also pacing, right? Because talking about embodiment is very different than living embodiment.
Yeah.
And really being able to like notice needs without judgment, attuning to the needs. We're going to have to practice. And sometimes the reality is when we practice something new, we're going to mess up. Mm-hmm. And we're going to get it wrong. And that's okay. I think it's more about like how we respond when we do get it wrong.
Yeah.
Right? More about like just noticing that judgment and then asking ourselves what we can do differently in the future. Yeah. Yeah, embodiment, we're here to tell you that if embodiment has felt out of reach for you or unsafe, that's also quite a normal response. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the best things that we can do as providers is slowing down. And so no step towards embodiment is too small, right? Mm-hmm. And Heidi and I think have both learned that over the years practicing, right? Because as neurotherapists, we can want to like, oh my gosh, we want this person to find relief. And the more we slow down with our bodies, that is also going to be one way that we are able to like really tune into our bodies. Yeah. So what are specific interventions that you kind of engage in with clients that are wanting to work on body image, embodiment, kind of both those things together?
I think, building off of what you just said, this idea of like, what are we going to do when we do have a sensation? Let's go ahead and plan for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good or bad, it can be scary.
Sure.
And seeing if we can come to an agreement that the sensations in our bodies are not always something to be managed or fixed, but yet just experienced. And then attuned to. And so what I mean by that is like if I'm noticing in my body that I'm having anxiety, I don't necessarily have to rush to get rid of that anxiety, but it might be giving me a message. And that message might be like, oh yeah, I need to go take the car in for the oil change. I forgot, and now I have anxiety about that.
Sure.
Great. It might be like I'm just feeling anxious today. I don't really know if there's a reason, but I'm gonna, just be aware of that and be gentle with myself that today might be a harder day. I might not get everything done that I want to get done. And so like being aware of our body and being like agreeing that when we get into our bodies and we feel sensations, we don't always have to change or fix them or get rid of them, but we can handle the feeling. That would be, before we start any body work, the thing that I would want us all to agree on.
Yeah.
And having a good vocabulary of like, how do we describe either the emotion words or the sensations in our bodies? Your therapist can help you with having those on hand in front of you. You can take them home. But I like to start with an intervention of like a body scan. And that doesn't mean that we have to. So a body scan is when you bring awareness to a part of your body and you spend a moment thinking about how that part of your body is living, experiencing, feeling. And that can be as specific as like the space between your eyebrows. Let's take a moment and be aware, bring awareness to the space between our eyebrows. It can be that small. And you can do a body scan from the top of your head to the tips of your toes. But often there are problem areas in the body where people are more avoidant than others.
Sure.
And so asking them, what would it be like to do a body scan of certain parts of your body? Which one do you think we could start with? And I am, like you said, fine with starting with any small step towards embodiment. And that can be like, I would only be comfortable with my hands. Great, let's do it. Yeah. So let's look at our hands. Let's be aware of our fingers. Let's bend our pinky finger. Let's see how that feels. We can even do mirror work where you could have like a small compact mirror where you look at our hands and we talk about the details of just the physical part of our hands that aren't being judgmental, but just neutral and factual. So body scans and mirror work, being aware of sensations in your body. So that can also be hierarchical of like, what feelings are you more comfortable with talking about? Joy and happiness. Okay. When you have felt joy, tell me a time. Oh, Christmas morning when I was a kid. Tell me a story. Okay. And we'd run downstairs and we'd tear open the presents. And where are you feeling that in your body right now? Let's take a moment and reflect And let's think about our body. And like, when you feel joy, where do you feel it? Oh, I feel it in my cheeks. I feel jumpiness in my arms. And so giving them language and giving them an opportunity to like embrace this idea of how to use these words and use these sensations in a way that feels okay to where they are. Those are the two things that I really like to start with.
I love it so much, so much. Well, and it can even give us information too about like the emotions or the physical sensations that feel really, really scary, right? And we don't have to start with those, right? We can start with the Christmas morning memory. And I noticed my cheeks, like I was just like grinning as you were telling me that memory. And yeah, it is really fascinating because we can also get into like some beliefs about emotions at large, or some what we call narrative work around like the story that we're telling ourselves about these physical sensations or the emotions. And so there's lots of like rich kind of segments, if you will, that we can go with based on what the client shares. And again, we don't have to start with the scariest physical sensation. And in fact, I would recommend we don't.
Yeah.
We can start with an area of someone's body that might feel safest to them, and we're going for building confidence and resiliency through this work as well.
Yeah, and how to experience your body with less judgment, and more of just experiential, like, truth. One thing that you can also do is, if they are really uncomfortable with inside their body, is bringing textures or temperatures that are external. Yep. You can help people to experience cold or hot, or like blankets or comfortable pillows, certain types of soft or rough textures, and giving them language around how to describe that to you, how they are feeling that with their body instead of in their body. All of these things can bridge the gap to getting them more comfortable with this idea of really just experience.
Yeah.
When I experience something and I can describe it to you, and then moving along at their comfort level.
Well, and there's so much research that shows that like naming our experiences, we don't want to ever take away the emotion. We want to move through the emotion, but it maybe lowers the distress around the emotionality of the experience that we're having. And so I certainly believe that's true for naming our physical sensations, naming our experience of our bodies. And yeah, I mean, embodiment, I mean, there's so many different like wonderful skills that we can use. Circling back to what you shared about like the anxiety, I also heard in that it's like, okay, if I do notice a day when maybe I'm more anxious, and how, you know, where do I experience that in my body, and how does that inform my response, right? So can I lower my expectations of myself on that day, right? Like you talked about, like maybe I'm not going to get everything that I wanted to do done today, and that's okay. There's like so many additional layers to that, in addition to like naming the physical sensation and the emotion there. And I did that before we started recording the podcast. So when we were in my office, I was noticing like I was sweating a little bit, and I named that to Heidi and our amazing producer, Erin. And there was so much like, just, I think, vulnerability in that, right? And comfort for me just in naming, I'm sweating a little bit, I'm a little bit nervous about this. And just having people that I trust in that space with me felt really comforting to me. And so there's an awareness, I think, that can allow us to identify our needs and then meet our needs.
Yeah, and thinking about this physiological idea of like, okay, well, I'm sweating, how that's not an emotion.
Right.
And thinking, another intervention that I often have people do is become aware of how they are avoiding their bodies. Sometimes this can be in the way they dress. Yeah. People will wear like clothes that are bigger than their size to hide their body, but they also can also lead to them not experiencing the size of their body. And so getting into the nitty gritty of like, how are they avoiding their body throughout their day? That can be like neglecting self-care.
Sure.
I know we talk self-abandonment a lot, but that is a form of like not taking care of ourselves, when it's like, well, I only need to shower for 5 minutes. What is perpetually happening when we shower for 5 minutes is we're not spending time in the shower with our body. What happens when we perpetually don't have time to put our lotion on is we're perpetually not touching all of our body. And so how does that add up when you're coming in and reporting that you feel disconnected from your body or you have poor body image? Is like, well, what would it be like to take a long shower? What would it be like to fully lotion your body and just be okay with having this be your body and being aware of it and touching it and taking care of it? All of those things can mean different things for people. But trying to get into the details of throughout their day, are they doing things that are pulling them away from their relationship with their body?
Yeah. And how is that impacting like embodiment at large or body image distress, whatever the distress is around, whether it's like thoughts or physical sensations or whatever it might be.
Yeah, this idea that like, well, when you take care of your body, when you do things that you think are nice for your body, like lotion, what does that do for your body image? When you are giving yourself the message that even if I don't like X, Y, or Z about my body, I still take care of it. I still nourish it. I still do nice things for it. It still deserves all of this. How does that change your body image when you purposefully start to do those things that maybe you've been denying?
Absolutely. Well, and Lauren and I talked a couple episodes ago about the body image spectrum, right? And it's like these are wonderful, beautiful examples of how to support moving towards, I think, body acceptance. Right. Yes. And of course, there's like a fluidity, right, to the spectrum. I think as human beings, we can be like so black and white and be like, oh my gosh, I'm at this point in the spectrum and I'm never going to go back, right? The point of this work is to notice like how we do respond to ourselves if we do by chance have a harder body image day. Maybe you've done a lot of work on embodiment and body image, and we're here to tell you, like, even if you do have a harder body image day, it's really about like, how do we move through that? How do we move forward? How do these small, tender acts, how do they start to shift the way that we experience our body and our acceptance over time, right? Because I think the response that a lot of clients of mine have given me over the years, and I certainly can understand this and deeply empathize with this, is like the perfectionism or the kind of the grand gestures of body image, right? Like that show up of like, well, like that's just like not going to matter. That's not going to help me. Or just like, I want to wake up tomorrow and have like amazing body image. And the reality is we're here to tell you like, body image starts to shift the more we have like an accumulation of these small tender efforts, I think.
Yeah. And there are events that come up in life that cause us to disconnect from our bodies and have to be mindful of re-engaging, like we've been talking about having babies. Like when you have a baby, you don't get to do your self-care routine. You might not be able to shower. And so finding that like when this season of life allows, I am going to come back to myself and start taking care of me when that feels like much more doable. And it's okay that I went a week without showering because I'm a new mom and I stink like milk and all those things. But this idea that like it doesn't have to be anything intentional that you've done to get in this situation, but realizing how much it might help if you do get back to taking time for yourself and taking time for your body. And like you said, this idea of like how I feel about my body and how I think about my body does not dictate if I take care of it. It does not dictate how much I take care of it. I still nourish it. I still lotion it. I still, no matter how I feel that day. And I think that's what is good to model for the children in our lives is like, it doesn't have to be that I look a certain way, that I feel good about my body. And it doesn't have to be that I feel good about my body and that's why I'm taking care of it.
Right. We can separate out those like emotions versus behaviors and kind of getting into the nuance there.
Yeah, like your body's worth doesn't change.
Yeah, so good. So we have a new Becoming Anchored in Peace with Your Body card deck. We have these in our offices here at Anchored, and Heidi and I were kind of flipping through some of the decks. So there's 61 cards, and on the front side of the card, there's an intervention. So basically what we've been talking about today, like different ways to support you in moving towards body peace. And on the back, there is an affirmation. So I'm not going to read the entirety of this intervention, but this one did feel pertinent to the work of embodiment. So here we go. Name the emotion you are feeling in the present moment. Notice where you experience that emotion in your body. Emotions show up in our bodies before we know what we are feeling. Identifying the physical sensations occurring in our bodies can support us in identifying what we are feeling. Naming an emotion can be valuable to us. Once we name an emotion, then we can name an underlying need. If we are angry, we may be feeling misunderstood. Anger gives us information about a need to set a boundary or that something needs to change. It can also tell us what we're passionate about. Oftentimes, we unknowingly take our anger, sadness, hurt, and fear out on our bodies. Naming an emotion not only builds the mind-body connection, it also gives us the opportunity to get our needs met without taking the emotion out in harmful ways on our bodies. Okay, so I guess I did read it all. It didn't make sense to chop it up there, right? But yeah, I mean, it's so true, right? Our emotions can just give us such rich information about our relationships, about what's happening internally, externally, all the things. So when we're paying attention, we have an opportunity to meet those needs. Yeah. What is a homework activity you would like to close with?
I would like to encourage, at your comfort level for you to think about how much are you spending time just being aware of your body, being in your body, giving yourself the awareness of how I feel, am I breathing enough? Next time I put on hand lotion, let me just be a little more mindful of what that feels like and bring awareness to my fingertips and my hands or my arm. And so just making an effort to slow down and be with your body in a way that feels good and feels intentional. That would be my homework.
I love it so much. And I will read the affirmation on the back of this card just as we close. So I notice my emotion with compassion as a cue. We've talked a lot about cues today to my internal, external, and relational experiences. Thank you all so much for being with us today. Really some great nuggets in today's episode.
Thank you so much for having me. I love it.
Of course. I can't wait to have you back. So we'll chat with Erin about another scheduled podcast recording time. But yeah, we will see you all next time. Take good care.